So I'd like to talk about self-esteem for a few moments and how it relates to failure and how people cope with failure. If we look at how the two different mindsets approach self-esteem, what becomes rather stark, with the entity-based or the fixed mindset people is that they tend to act in certain ways that defend, or protect their self-esteem. And as I've put down here, they tend to assign blame. They'll look for other people to blame. And again, as I go through these, you'll probably be able to think of some people in organisations who carry out these sorts of behaviours. They assign blame to their failure. It's not my fault. Blame him. It's him over there. Go and focus on those guys. They're the ones who are the problem. So again, as a consultant, I'm always rather amused by when I have conversations with individuals that the problem doesn't seem to be in the person sat across from me. It's always outside the room with someone else. They make excuses for their failure, and quite often they might blame the tools, and we all know that famous expression that a good workman never blames his tools. People with the growth mindset take responsibility for their failures and do their best to get themselves back on track. Quite often people will rationalise their failure. Now, the example to give of this, and again one that Dweck uses, is that in helping students to improve where they have been considered to have failed, and again as this big note on the bottom of the slide says, it's not about being a failure, i.e. if I fail then I am a failure. It's not that at all. It's the fact that, you know what, failure is just a bit of information. It's just a bit of information that you haven't succeeded in this particular task, rather than make ourselves the object of change. So Dweck in her experiments offers students the opportunity to go and look at people who scored better than them in their tests. I think she actually gives them a choice as to, would you like to look at the people who did better than you or the people who did worse than you? And it's really an interesting stark contrast that the people who didn't get some questions right in the tests, and these tests were designed to make people fail, inverted commas, when they're offered the opportunity to go and look at the scores of people who did better or worse than them, the people with the growth mindset wanted to look at the scores of people who were better than them because they wanted to improve, because they recognized and understood that if we look at the improving scores, then that's probably going to help us improve ourselves. Versus the people with the entity mindset, the fixed mindset. Instead, they wanted to go off and look at the people who did worse than them, because they had the attitude of, well, at least I'm not as bad as these people. So it's, to me, this is a rather amusing way of looking at things. And again, the idea here is to protect my self-esteem. It's not anything to do with learning. It's about looking good and making sure I don't look bad. And if I am beginning to believe that I'm looking bad, I certainly want to make sure that I'm not looking as bad as other people. So it's better to maybe be somewhere in the middle rather than way down the end being worse. And this fourth aspect here, people will avoid feedback, and they'll go to extreme lengths to do that. Now, one of the places I come across this so often in organisations is this idea of 360 feedbacks. Now, I know the most agile of leaders, those with the most agile mindset, relish the idea of doing 360 feedback because they know that there's going to be something that they'll get out of it, that they'll be able to learn from some of the stuff that will come up, because they know that as part of this 360 feedback, there's going to be a mix of feedback. There's going to be what might be considered good feedback, i.e. stuff that builds their confidence and tells them where they're doing well. But equally, there might be some negative feedback, some bad feedback, some feedback that lets them know that, you know what, you maybe need to improve in certain areas. Now, I've rather over-egged the pudding here because there isn't any such thing really as positive or negative feedback, good or bad feedback. Feedback is just feedback, and it really is, as I said earlier, a judgment about how you perceive the feedback, either to be good or bad. I can tell you that in most of the situations and circumstances I've been in organizations is that managers will find a lot of reasons to not do feedback or to not do the 360 feedback. But they'll give me all sorts of other reasons rather than maybe the real reason. And again, if I'm trying to build a good relationship with leaders, I don't challenge them on this at the outset because I don't find that it helps build good relationships with them. But I'll be interested to hear what the reasoning is behind why doing 360 feedbacks is not a good idea. Now, of course, if you have anything to do with Agile transformations or any experience at all in Agile, you'll know how extremely important feedback is. So this particular aspect, and especially in the leadership teams, if the leadership teams aren't willing to embrace feedback, then we're going to have a bit of a problem moving forward. Because what will tend to happen is the mindset will be we're going to change the organization, change people below us in the organization, rather than make ourselves the object of change. Now, that's not to say that change won't occur within the organization. All I'm suggesting and hypothesizing is the change won't be as deep, it won't last as long, and it certainly won't be as impactful as we would like it to be. Agile holds great promises for organizations, and business agility and organizational agility are the places where leaders are starting to focus more of their efforts, but they can't really expect the organization to be agile if the leaders themselves, aren't going to be agile. And thus, by avoiding feedback, they demonstrate that they're not open to change, and as a result, people within the organization will be less likely to embrace change.